how about the Christology of John? Of course, this is core throughout. It's all about Christology. So how could you sum that up? Key points.
Well, this gospel, along with certain hints in Paul, is the first place where we see serious theological reflection on what came to be called the Trinity. There's God the Father. There's the only begotten Son who can also be called God right from the jump in John 1, right? And then say things like, before Abraham was, I am, which at very minimum means I pre-existed Abraham. So there's that. But there's also the person of the Holy Spirit called the Parakletos, who's clearly not merely a force, may the force be with us, it's a person. He says, I will send another Parakletos. And that the basic meaning of that word is an advocate or a counselor, not so much a comforter as a teacher of some kind, and he will lead you unto all truth. So we already have the beginnings, the raw material, if you will, of a Trinitarian way of looking at God in the Gospel of John. And not a surprise that because there is so much Christological material in this gospel, it becomes the basis of the discussions at the Council of Nicaea in 325 and the discussions at Chalcedon in 450 about what do we say about the relationship of the Son to the Father and what do we say about the two natures of Christ, his humanity and his divinity. Not a surprise that the Gospel of John is the heavy hitter that they're discussing and debating at those two ecumenical councils in the 4th and 5th century, for sure. So it's a very high Christology, but it's not a Christology that should lead us to say, well, Jesus was 90% divine and 10% human. Because at the very same time, the author wants to emphasize the full and true humanity of Jesus throughout the gospel. He's not merely a divine person wearing human skin. He's the God-man. I really am not happy with the translation of the end of the prologue in John 1 that says, and the word became flesh, because that's really not what's being said. What's being said is the word took on flesh. It was an additive process, not an exchange process. He ceased to be the word and he became something else. Wrong. No, he took on flesh and became the God-man. And so we have this powerful theology of the incarnation. Fully divine, fully human. Well, how does that work? If we can have a moment of Christological discussion, I would say that what happens is what Paul says happened in Philippians 2. He put the omnis on hold, omniscience, omnipotence, omnipresence, etc., and accepted the normal limitations of being human, limitations of time and space and knowledge and power and mortality. What he didn't assume was the limitation of sin, which is not a natural human limitation. God didn't make us that way. It's acquired as a result of human fallenness, right? So Jesus, the Son of God, limits himself in order to be fully human. So he weeps at the grave of a friend. He's hungry at various points. He's thirsty. He needs rest, all those sorts of things. And if we were to borrow a little bit from Luke, Luke tells us as he was growing up, he grew in wisdom and his stature as well. He's Adam without the fall. In terms of his humanity, he's Adam gone right. The Adam who resisted temptation, the Adam who lived out the way God wanted human race to live out as well. So, my word would be the high Christology does not in any way negate the high humanity of Christ. He had to be fully human to die. And he for sure died on the cross. that being the case, what we have to do is accept the mystery that he was the God man. He represented God to us and us to God, and was the perfect revelation of both of these things. And that's also why, because he was truly human, that the New Testament can go on and say that we should be imitators of Christ. You know, I used to have a problem with that when I was young. My Sunday school teacher would say, be like Christ, be like Christ. And there'd be this little voice in the back of my head that said, yeah, right. He had a God button. I don't even have an easy button. How can I be like Christ? You know, what's that really all about? But then when I realized that he condescended and accepted our normal limitations, and we have been given the grace so that we can resist temptation and approximate being Christ-like without becoming Christ, because we'll never do that. Nevertheless, his humanity is set up as an example for us to follow, as an ethical paradigm of resisting sin, doing good, glorifying God in all that we are, being faithful unto death, all that sort of stuff. And so, you know, in many ways, the Gospel of John is the richest and fullest portrait of both the divinity and the humanity of Christ.
How about the I am sayings? You already touched on those some, relating them to wisdom, but yeah. I guess the main question is, are these evidence of Jesus' claim to divinity?
Well, the wisdom figure in Proverbs 8 and 9 is a personification of an attribute of God, God's wisdom, God's mind, the very mind of God. So even if you just look at this in light of wisdom literature, the answer to the question is, it already implies that he's part of the Godhead, for sure. Because only he can offer the way, the truth, and the life. And of course, in the Old Testament, only God can offer those things. Only God can offer the way, the truth, and the life. Only God can offer the resurrection, and so on. So, yeah, it's a different way of suggesting what, for example, Paul says straight up, which is that he is indeed of the very nature God.
Please check out more videos from The Charge. Don't forget to click on like and hit the subscribe button.